Hello everyone, Musa Gaming here, and today I'll be doing another episode of Unofficial Commander Spotlight, featuring Richard I, the Lionheart. Richard is the very first Wheel of Fortune commander that specializes in tanking, with skills that allow him to heal himself, take less damage, and punish the attackers. This is a commander that basically tells everyone in Rise of Kingdoms that Wheel of Fortune commanders are one of the most powerful commanders in the game, and Richard, as one of the first Wheel of Fortune commanders that's released outside of Gold Key commanders, is a great example to show people, hey, when you have one of those Wheel of Fortunes come around, you gotta pull for those because otherwise you'll get wrecked in the field. Without further ado, let's just take a look at why he's so strong. So his first skill, basically with 1000 rage requirement, he will heal himself for 1400 damage factor, but on top of that, he will also reduce 30% of the damage for up to 5 targets in front of him, and make sure that they are slowed down for 15% of the march speed. So let's just actually look at line by line. So he heals himself for 1400 damage factor. That doesn't really get scaled up with skill damage factor, but then again, because his other skills work really well with him to take less damage, this 1400 damage factor is actually quite a lot if you actually use him. You'll find out once you actually get yourself on the field with Richard. But one of the reasons why a lot of people actually use Richard with just 5111 is because of how strong the skill is. The skill basically is the identity of Richard for healing himself for so much and reducing damage of the target that you're actually hitting too. So really powerful heal, and then it also does reduce the damage of whatever you're targeting for up to 2 seconds only. But then again, 30% damage reduction. That is huge. So if you're going to take, let's say, 1000 damage, you're only going to take 700 damage. Really powerful skill. As a tank, this is probably, you can't probably ask for better first skill than this. And then it also does march speed reduction as well. So powerful first skill. Let's go ahead and move on. Second skill is a passive skill that basically does damage reduction of 15% and deals 10% more counterattack damage. So counterattack damage is good because he's a tank, and a lot of people are, if a lot of marchers are actually attacking him, he'll deal more damage to those who are surrounding it and dealing damage to itself. But then again, if you actually look at his other part of the skill, 15% damage reduction. And this is without any conditions whatsoever. This is not like if you're taking damage, you have 10% chance, there's no cooldown on it. You just straight up take 15% less damage from anything that's hitting you. So this is one of the crucial skills of Richard, and one of the reasons why Richard is so tanky is because by default he is going to take 15% at 5511, and a lot of people are going to try to attack you. But then again, let's say if you're supposed to take 1000 damage, you take 850 damage, and on top of that, if you actually have the first skill's debuff inflicted on that target, you basically take about half the damage only from the target that's hitting you. So which is a really strong skill. Second skill makes him a step closer to a perfect tank, on top of having his first skill. Excuse me. The third skill, Lionheart, gives you basically 30% stats, 15% attack, 15% defense. Not so great, not so bad. It's a decent skill for you to have. Let's go ahead and move on to this fourth skill. So fourth skill basically increases the healing that this commander receives by up to 30%. And it takes up to 30% reduction from watchtowers when you're attacking a city. Watchtower attack damage reduction is not really strong, but then again, that 30% healing buff, that will basically complete this first skill. So if you're doing 1400 damage factor for your heal, you'll do 30% more of that. That is going to be probably around 1820. So makes him really strong tank and kind of completes that healing tank factor of Richard by increasing that healing amount by 30%. Now for his expertise skill, this commander takes 5% less damage. So another damage reduction skill. You can see that his first skill does 30% damage reduction, 15% damage reduction from his second skill, and another 5% damage reduction for Richard. Now, so basically, if you have an expertise Richard, no matter what you do from second skill and the fourth skill alone, he will take 20% less damage. If you are targeting it, if you happen to align your active skill with whatever damage that big damage that you're about to target, you're about to receive, you can get up to 50% damage reduction, and that is almost unconditional. So this makes him really strong tank. Again, he is one of the most overpowered tank that you actually face first when you first see him on the Wheel of Fortune. And this is why he's so strong and tanky. Like he has up to 50% damage reduction, and like there's nothing for anyone like Minamoto, who's a single target damage nuker, to go around it. It just allows him to be on the field with very minimal risk because he takes so much less damage than other commanders in the game. The other part's not really that important. Infantry units deal 2% more damage to cavalry units. By default, infantry does 5% more damage to cavalry, I think. So just 2% additional can't be bad. It's not as strong as the 5% less damage, but then again, pretty strong, powerful cavalry counter part of the skill. And then whenever this troop launches a basic attack, it reduces the target's march speed by 50% for 5 seconds with cooldown of 10 seconds. So if you were to expertise Richard would actually be able to chase down the target that you're hitting with a lot more ease with this skill right here, because it will reduce the march speed by 50%, which is a huge amount for 5 seconds as you attack it. So it doesn't have a chance. It's not like 10% chance to trigger this. It's like whenever you launch a basic attack, you're going to basically slow that target down. And most likely this will almost guarantee you activating your first skill and secondary skill to make sure that you can do damage to whatever you're targeting. So overall, very strong set. I would recommend that you either use him as 5-5-1-1 or 5-5-5-1 or even 5-5-5-5. At every single level, skill level that you actually have him, he's going to be really strong. The minimum that I would do recommend though is using him as 5-1-1-1 because that healing factor is going to be pretty strong. If you can choose all the skills that you want, but you can't expertise him, you can technically use him as 5-5-1-5. Again, like 20% infantry stats that you're missing out on this is going to be pretty big, but then again, not as strong as the extra 20% healing bonus that you'll be able to get from this fourth skill. Again, really strong set. Makes him the ultimate tanker that you'll face and you'll have no way to go around when you first enter the game. Period. So how do you get Richard? And I've been saying this, so nothing too crazy. So you get something as you enter the game, as you approach the first KVK1, which is a server versus server combat, you'll be able to see a Wheel of Fortune that would actually appear on one of your missions, like I don't know how you call it, this section, but like events tab, and it will basically allow you to spin the wheel using the gems, and if you get lucky, you'll be able to get enough sculptures for you to actually acquire Richard, the first 10 Sculptures are basically the only thing that you will need to unlock him, and then you can either use gold heads, legendary commander sculptures, or pull more of those richer sculptures from that Wheel of Fortune to actually have him to usable level for you to use him during the first KVK. Richard is one of those commanders that also has those museum buffs. If you see it at max museum buff relic, max relic, you will have 15% movement speed for Richard, which is actually pretty good, and 10% extra counterattack damage. Personally, I don't think this is a really strong museum buff for a commander that has 3 relic, to be really, really honest. So I don't think a lot of people actually get this relic, like 3-star relic for Richard. But he does have a relic. It does make him like less up. His power fall off less. So as you basically progress through the game, and if you don't want to just use him for a commander swap event as you enter Season of Conquest, you can still use Richard as with those relics if you want to use him. But my recommendation is not actually using him at all in Season of Conquest unless you're doing barbarian hunting, where healing will be actually become really handy for you. So that's how you get him. That's how you get. We just took a look at museum buff. And let's go ahead and move on to a tier maker, and then take a look at the best pairing for Richard. All right, now we are at the tier maker for Richard, and let's just go ahead and take a look at some of the options that we have for KVK1. So in KVK1, you have Charles Martel, which is another very strong infantry commander. If you want more of a DPS option for KVK1, Sun Tzu is a very good option until you actually have Yi Sung-ge, who is probably one of the strongest commanders that you'll get access to in KVK1. So in terms of order, I would say Yi Sung-ge comes first, because Richard is a tanking march, and what he lacks is really doing damage to whatever you're hitting, and having Yi Sung-ge, which is the strongest area effect damage dealer in the game at KVK1, Richard Yi Sung-ge becomes one of the most annoying and really no option, like unbeatable DPS marsh that you have to face in KVK1. So in my opinion, the best pair for KVK1 is actually Richard with Yi Sung-ge. If you're maybe doing a city garrison or garrisoning something, Richard Yi Sung-ge is also a great option. But then again, you can also swap him out with Charles Martel and Sun Tzu if you want to last as long as possible. If you want to maximize your counterattack damage because you are getting mega swarmed by like 30 different marches, Charles Martel, there will be places where Charles Martel will become better pairing than Yi Sung-ge. But overall, I think Yi Sung-ge is still the best even in garrison situations, rally situation, whatever it is that you use him for. Now, as you enter KVK2, you actually unlock something called someone called Alexander the Great. He is an infantry, another Wheel of Fortune commander that is really, really strong. He is probably one of the first infantry damage dealer that you actually get for KVK2. And paired with Richard, he actually becomes pretty strong option for you to use in KVK2 in any scenario. So I'll say KVK2, Alexander the Great is one of the best options for you to have. And for Season of Conquest, I'll say you just have to use Richard for barbs. So this doesn't mean that you should pair him with Lohar, but I'm just saying that this is like for barbs. So let me just actually just type it here. So seasonal conquest, barbarians only. So if you want to do barbarians in seasonal conquest, you can technically use Hera, but I think the best pairing for him for barbs is actually either Zhuge Liang or YSG. The reason for that is because Zhuge Liang, where's Zhuge Liang? Do they not have Zhuge Liang here? No, there should be. There you go. So Zhuge Liang actually allows you. Zhuge Liang is basically the Isangye YSG 2.0. So it will do a lot of AoE damage. But then again, if you have Richard as secondary or first, it doesn't really matter. On top of Zhuge Liang, it allows you to do 5 target AoE with a very sustainable march. So it will allow you to chain barbarians almost infinitely. And having Zhuge Liang along with Richard allows you to play do a lot of damage to Season of Conquest barbarians, and have that infinite chain of barbarians when paired with Zhuge Liang. So Zhuge Liang is the best option. I don't think Hera is the best option because they're both kind of tanky, but then again they lack the damage, so the barbarian chaining is not really effective as Zhuge Liang and Richard. So if you're doing barbs only in Season of Conquest, let me actually just write them down. SOC barbs only. If you're doing Season of Conquest barbs, Richard, Zhuge Liang, probably one of the best combos that you can have, along with I think Huo and Isangye. So recommended for Season of Conquest. Even if you have him like 5-1-1-1, he'll do fine. Alright, so we just took a look at the best pairing for Richard, and then now let's move on to the final rating for Richard. Alright, now we're at the final rating sheet for Richard. Personally, I'll actually give him a 4-star. Charles Martel in pre-KVK is 4-star. And I think Richard, as he enters, is probably around there. If not, a little bit better, but not as good as a 4.5-star, I would say. And with a comment, basically, Cavs worst nightmare in KVK 1. So cavalry, as they don't really have, as you enter KVK 1, cavalry don't really get a new Wheel of Fortune commander or anything else. And I think the only time that the cavalry can actually start countering Richard I is when they enter KVK season 2 and have unlocked Saladin, which will have a lot of healing reduction. But then again, during the KVK 1, you really can't face Richard as cavalry. And, as a cavalry main, I had nightmares about Richard myself. So I will say that Richard I is cavalry's worst nightmare in KVK 1. And you can just call it a day from there. Archers actually have a way to counter Richard with Tutmos and Isongye, because Tutmos has healing reduction from his first skill, active skill, and Isongye and Tutmos combined will do a lot more damage to Richard I because they're archers, both archer commanders. But then again, at the same time, Tutmos is very hard for you to get when compared to, let's say, Richard. Even at 5-1-1-1, you're almost 60% of your maximum strength there. So I hope you enjoyed this video. Let me know what you think about my unofficial commander spotlight for Richard I. Please leave a like or comment down below. And if you like this content, please subscribe for the channel. And I hope you have a great rest of your day. Thank you.